Lost Media.
Welcome to the Independent Voter Podcast from Independent Voter Project. We're going to expand a little bit. A new era of independent voter news that the journalists just don't cover, where we have these debates on a national level, really taking on issues so that people have more educated disagreements with each other. Let's just explain how the process really works.
Lost Media.
Welcome to the Independent Voter Podcast from Independent Voter Project. We're going to expand a little bit. A new era of independent voter news that the journalists just don't cover, where we have these debates on a national level, really taking on issues so that people have more educated disagreements with each other. Just explain how the process really works.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kara McCormick from the Independent Voter Podcast. It's wonderful to be with you. Today's episode is about the unfair fight, how Missouri's cannabis industry is battling unregulated gas station weed. And we have a guest this morning called Dave Craig. He is the Vice President of Marketing for one of Missouri's legal cannabis brands called From the Earth. It's one of Missouri's top-selling brands, and they've got dispensaries in and around Kansas City. And Dave, it's great to be with you. I know that when Missouri voters first approved medical cannabis way back in 2018, and then they approved recreational use just 4 years later, it was like one of the fastest turnarounds in the whole country from when the voters asked for it to when the voters got it. Usually things don't happen that fast. I'm from Maine, you're from Missouri. It was way slower in Maine, let me tell you.
Yeah, it was definitely, I believe at the time, that might still be the fastest transition from a medical market to a recreational market. And we were very fortunate that we were, very far down the ladder on states that had legalized it. So we were able to take all of their experience, all of the things you had learned on what to do, what not to do. And ultimately, we were able to get it added to the ballot. It was a constitutional amendment. So it is actually a legal addition to the Constitution that cannabis is regulated, legalized in the state of Missouri through the department, DHSS. And inside of that is the DCR, and that's the Department of Cannabis Regulation. So that's the legal body that regulates cannabis inside of Missouri, or is supposed to.
So they had a really, it looks like it passed in 2018, the medical marijuana part with like 65% of the vote.
Yeah.
That's huge. And then it looks like it passed in 2022 with Amendment 3 with 53% of the vote. I feel like that's right around Maine's passage was 54%. Yeah. And then, so it's right in the Constitution in Missouri now. And there's a pretty clear framework for what's cool and what's not cool. And the medical dispensaries opened right away for the medical part. And then now it sounds like you're doing pretty well. I was reading that it's something like $1.5 billion in revenue that's being generated by the industry in Missouri at this point.
Yeah. So Missouri has benefited from its location. So if you look at that map behind you, several of the states around Missouri do not have medical or recreational cannabis. So it's a bit of a prohibition moat. So we don't encourage people to purchase and then go back to their states. We say hang out in Missouri, enjoy your products there, obviously. But we do get a lot of cross-state traffic, and I think that's really been a big boon for the industry, which has, Missouri has grown to be the sixth or the fifth largest cannabis market in the country. But unfortunately, that is at risk now. What we've seen over the last several years, and really in the last 18 months, it's really sort of hit critical mass, is the opening of unregulated dispensaries that are outside of the purview of the law. Additionally, you have smoke and vape shops who are an important part of the industry, an important part of the culture, and something that I love stores like that. I grew up going to get a piece of glass or a pipe or a bong or something. So I respect it, but those stores now are also carrying hemp derived intoxicants THCA flower, which is supposed to be Farm Bill compliant, and then other synthetic cannabinoids. And unfortunately,
So is what you're saying is like while the legal market, the legal cannabis market is sort of growing, there's like a whole other market kind of growing alongside of it. And one is selling legal cannabis that's been like tested and taxed and is totally regulated based on the Constitution. And then this other one, there's these products that you can kind of find in these gas stations and smoke shops, and it's like hemp derived THC, right?
Yeah. So there's a couple things, right? So they're hemp derived like THC, THC. There's a whole alphabet soup of these synthetic cannabinoids, and those are unregulated. That means that even though that they are derived from cannabis and synthetic, they are not regulated by the Department of Cannabis Regulation. And we think that's sort of a glaring oversight in regards to the interpretation of that amendment. Additionally, and this is kind of a big thing, right? The 2018 Farm Bill is a federal law that legalized THC products nationally if they're below 0.3% THC, 0.3% THC. So what that essentially did was that allowed for the sale of THCA flower. Now, all cannabis flower is essentially THCA flower. Through the process of decarboxylation, which is essentially just lighting it on fire, it becomes THC. So you're essentially, through this sort of loophole, cannabis flower and some of its derivatives were essentially sort of legalized federally. This was not the intention of the Farm Bill. I mean, Mitch McConnell is a very strongly against cannabis, and he's even you can find the videos everywhere of him being like, we had no idea what we were doing here when we did this. But even with that being said, this 0.3% THC limit, members of the community, members of the cannabis industry, just the press, had gone around and purchased products from these stores and had them tested from independent third-party cannabis labs. And those test results showed that they were not Farm Bill compliant. They were not 0.3%. On average, they were over 22 times above that limit, like effectively making it unregulated cannabis.
So basically what you're saying is like chemists figured out that you can take like this legal, quote unquote, legal hemp and turn it into these other things when it's heated. So like on paper, like it looks like it's hemp compliant under the Farm Bill, but really like the way that they're doing it makes it intoxicating.
Not even so. There's multiple layers to it. There's multiple layers to it. There's like there's the gummies, the edibles, the pills that are like THCP, THCH, these different synthetics. And then you have, that's one component of it. And then the other component of it is the THCA flower and pre-rolls and anything that comes in that regard. And then you have your vapes and all that stuff that derive from that flower and the gummies. And all of those things sort of claim to be Farm Bill compliant, but after we've tested them, they're just not. Also,
and it's like they're bad, right? Like there's, it's not just that they're not Farm Bill compliant; it's that they have all this other stuff in them. Exactly. Like what's in them?
Yeah. So on top of not being Farm Bill compliant, they also they failed testing for pesticides, industrial solvents, and heavy metals. And that was about 40% of the samples tested failed for that. So one thing that's really important to understand, and this is like, it's not the consumers.
We're in the weeds.
You're in the weeds, right? Yeah. So how would you know? You see a dispensary and you're like, oh, that looks like a dispensary. Why would it not be, right? Why would the state allow this? But what's happening is because of that gray area, you have these products that are dangerous to the public because they're unregulated. Like, you have them passing tests that, like, if you walk into a legal dispensary, the products on those shelves have been tested at a regulatory level that is like a factor of 10 above what your food at the grocery store is tested at.
Yeah. So, can you tell me like a little bit about that? Like the regulations, like how the weed in a properly licensed, regulated cannabis shop, like how safe is it? Or like it's tested from the very seed, like you're growing it in the ground, right?
Yeah. So It's exactly what you said. It's seed to sale tracking. We use a system in Missouri called Metric, METRC. It's adopted in almost every single state that has a legal cannabis market, medical or recreational. And it's a seed to sale tracking mechanism. So basically, the moment something is planted and whatever the grow medium is, it gets a tag. And that tag follows it all the way through till it's put in a jar or vape or whatever the final medium is of a product being sold. And the state can access that at any time. And so you get like, all of a sudden the state could be like, hey, this thing moved through and at some point here, there's 11 ounces missing. What happened? Investigation. Like there's rigorous processes and procedures. And it's important. It's a regulated market and it should be regulated because you're consuming something, you're putting something in your body. There's a lot of stuff that go wrong. So for you to go into a legal dispensary and to have bought a product, it passed a state certified cannabis lab test that tested for all the things that are actually in it, right? The different cannabinoids, all that good stuff. It also tested for an insane number of pesticides, heavy metals, mold, fungus, bacteria, solvents, all that different stuff. So when you manufacture something like a vape pen, if it's a live resin pen, the extraction medium might be something like butane. And in the process of manufacturing it, the butane is burnt off and removed from the product to a level deemed safe by the FDA. Now, if it's an unregulated product, we've seen the tests. They might have like 20 times more butane, and sometimes they have solvents that aren't authorized. Like we had one product come back with like 14 times the safe limit of like acetone. So you're smoking acetone, and these aren't things that we want.
That's like nail polish remover.
Yes, essentially, and that's not a medium that like the legal industry would ever use.
Right. So it's like when you go to the store and you buy butter or you buy milk,
yes,
or you buy meat, or you buy cannabis, that somebody has paid attention to the origin of it, to where it's coming from, and that it meets certain levels, and it is it's regulated, it's safe, and it probably costs you guys, the legal cannabis operators, quite a lot of money to basically always and forever be in compliance with all the rules.
Yeah, that's a super good point that you made. It's like it's all of those regulatory components have a cost associated with them. And we have several hundred employees between our businesses. And a good chunk of those employees, like over 100, are involved in some way to a regulatory capacity for compliance. So that's inventory management. That's the metric product tracking. That's packaging. That's like all the different things you can think of, right?
Oh, because there's packaging rules too, right? So that it doesn't look like something is actually a Haribo gummy bear, or like it can't look like something that a kid would be like, oh, this delicious chewing gum or Pop Rocks or whatever,
Every state has, that's one that it's a patchwork of laws. If every state has different ones, but all of them have a very clear standard on not appealing to children. And Missouri, which is a little bit more conservative, has been really good at ensuring that the legal cannabis products you cannot confuse them. They're very basic. They're very simple. There's even one talk of making them look like pharmaceutical packaging, like literally just, it's like a typed line. We didn't do that, but it's still very, very simple. You walk into some of these stores and you essentially find like, it's the Skittles packaging, but it's called Slizzles. Or it's like Trolley, like the gummy worms or the gummy rings, but like it's TRRL. It's like, it's just spelled slightly different, but it is effectively the exact same packaging. So
and then also, do they have like, is it hard to open certain things? Like, do you have rules about, so that kids can't like actually open the package very easily? Is there any of that involved?
Like a child seal or a child tamper packaging, that has effectively sort of been replaced with tamper tags. So something where like, if it's been opened, I guess, but that's only after the first time. There isn't necessarily like, you like push down and twist it. That actually is not a requirement. But otherwise,
so basically like just make sure that you put it on a high shelf or put it inside of like parents have to take responsibility if they've got kids at home, for storing it properly. There's
just certainly no way that you're going to see a bunch of you're not going to see something and be like, oh, let's find 10 of these when that's like a terrible idea. So yeah. All that's
happening, but it's like there's this other whole market that's growing like alongside. And all
Yeah.
these people who are sort of creating and selling this intoxicating hemp they don't have to test from seed to sale. They don't have to spend the money to make sure the packaging or have any kind of regulations.
So this is
So it's like a very unlevel playing field.
Yeah. So like around Kansas City now, and I don't really understand how the billboard companies are able to get away with this, but you'll see billboard companies advertising like $10 eighths or like 1 cent pre-rolls and stuff like that. And because these companies and these brands do not have to follow any of the regulatory compliance measures, they are selling it significantly cheaper than a legal one is supposed to. Now, all things being considered, there's actually a report from the MoCan trade industry. We still have about 40% of our canopy to grow into statewide. So like the capacity of the state the legal capacity is underutilized. And as that capacity, if there's an incentive to keep rolling it out, the more products will continue to enter the legal market and the products will continue to drop. It's been a trend every quarter, every year since we became medical rec, and it happens in every state. They get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as people streamline. There's a ways of consolidation. People just get better at it, right? But then you have these other companies who are just rushing to the front, selling $100 ounces or a couple $100 quarter pounds. That's not something that's possible for the legal industry, and there's a good reason for it. So it's an unfair playing field. And additionally, in 2024, the legal cannabis market, this is reported by the DHSS, paid $245 million in state and local taxes, and those are the cannabis.
I saw that $245 million, and that's just in 2024.
Yeah, correct.
So that is a ton of money. And so I think a third of it will go to the Missouri Veterans Commission.
It's split. So there's the local, the counties, the cities, they can add a 3% additional tax.
So like there's state and then there's the local taxes, and the state taxes get divided according. Like a lot of that state tax money will go to veterans and to programs.
Veterans Commission, the Public Defender's Office, and a couple different agencies, and then they split it up between them for different priorities. And the unfortunate thing is that as the black market, the unregulated market continues to grow, tax revenue is getting siphoned out of local initiatives, and it's effectively taking money from veterans. It's taking money from schools. This is what the constitutional amendment. The people voted for this, and now what these companies are paying is they're not paying the right taxes. And it creates this skewed market where people don't really understand. And it's not their fault. You see something that looks effectively like a dispensary and you just don't know the difference. You don't know. So what we really hope is that the state, local law enforcement will sort of clarify. I think there's a lot of confusion across all different levels of government, who's supposed to take care of what. And when we've talked to people about this and we've informed them that, hey, if you look at these maps and there are more stores selling unregulated cannabis products than there are legal stores. So like you had mentioned that the cannabis market in Missouri is growing and is pretty stable. It is actually declining. If you look at the September sales, it actually went down. And like for our business, effectively, we have opened new stores this year at a significant cost. And 100 additional employees, we're actually making less money than we were at the beginning of the year. So it is, and in St. Louis, I've heard some people report that this year they're looking at like a 37% drop in revenue. And cannabis doesn't, because it's considered Schedule I federally, we don't have the ability to do any sort of like tax deductions. So we're effectively taxed at like a 50% plus rate. So everyone's like, oh, the cannabis industry is really successful, generates a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to run it. So the margins of profit are very, very, very slim. And you see something like this happen, where just sort of this unregulated market is somehow allowed to just blossom adjacent in parallel. It really hurts the industry. And it cannabis has been a major job driver. I think if you look at some of the reports from the original transition from medical and rec, at one point, the cannabis market was the largest driver of new jobs in Missouri. We're up to 20,000 plus jobs. All of those are effectively at risk because if you just have like one or two people hanging out in a smoke shop selling these products, you sort of destroy that chain all the way down the ladder.
So I'll just say, so it sounds to me like there's a bunch of problems. One of them is that cannabis is still a Schedule 1 drug, categorized alongside heroin since Richard Nixon, 1970. No president has been able to reschedule it. We're definitely watched the President Trump in the Oval Office about, 2 months ago say that a big decision was coming on rescheduling. And rescheduling is important to the cannabis industry because of this tax treatment. So right now, it's treated a certain way that doesn't allow any legal cannabis entity to deduct any of its regular business expenses. So that right there makes it a super dicey proposition for a business person who can't deduct his actual business expenses, right?
It's the industry at a disadvantage relative to other industries. So they call it the 280E tax provision. And that's something that that's huge. Now the rescheduling, now we probably think it would end up being maybe like a Schedule 3 drug. That opens up tons of new avenues for business to flourish. And I think that means that you can potentially have larger banks come in. You could have more institutional investors. There isn't a Starbucks of cannabis. Maybe we got some of the bigger MSAs that like Verano or Curaleaf that are probably the closest thing to it. But there isn't really a national. Not saying that's necessarily a requirement or even a good thing, but just it's because of the way that institutional money can invest in the industry and expand it. So access to capital would make the industry a lot healthier and able to do better things for the consumer. So
what it also seems to me like it would enable you to compete a little bit better with the people who are doing all this illegal stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's all about the level playing field. And it's not about it's not about restricting competition. It's not about putting people out of business. It's not about anything like that. It's just, we all sort of agreed with this constitutional amendment about one interpretation about how cannabis should be handled. And
you're not trying to kill hemp either, right?
Absolutely not.
That's hemp has all kinds of legitimate use.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the crazy things, hemp can be used for millions of things, industrial purposes. We could go on for ages about the things that it could be used for. And if you look at the percentage of hemp that is grown in this country and even in the Midwest or Missouri that goes into these products is, again, I'd have to fact check this, but I've seen it being as low as less than 1% of those products, less than 1% of hemp, basically. So you're talking about the hemp industry claims that the cannabis industry is trying to kill the hemp industry. As just flat out not true. This is not true. And it's just, it's an easy talking to say that, it's them versus them. That's just not true.
So tell me, Dave, what is the state doing about this? I've done a lot of reporting on Texas and California and all the different places where there are these intoxicating hemp bans that have been put through. I think Governor Gavin Newsom of California talked about going to a store that was near his house, where he lives with all of his kids, and being able to see this gas station weed and, just having this personal experience of it, besides wanting the legal cannabis industry to thrive, he seems like he got really mad about it. And so I think that in Missouri, your governor tried to do something with an executive order, but then he ran up against some legal problems. And I think your attorney general and then your legislature. Tell us a little bit about on the ground, what's happening politically.
So a year ago, people in the legislative branch, the governor, the congressional officials, council people, they didn't really recognize the issue. They didn't really understand it. And this last year, they've really made a concerted effort to learn, to talk with people in the industry, concerned parents, community members, and really, as we begun to realize this has become like a pretty serious problem now. So in St. Louis recently, there was an effort to ban these hemp-derived intoxicants, and it was pushed to a vote early, and it was killed. It was killed. Now, how specifically that happened, we believe that maybe the hemp lobby, other people might have gotten involved, and it was just killed on the spot. Now, the hope was that would have been brought to the state as sort of template for how to do things, right? How to really kind of solve.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the legislative session in Kansas City starts in January, and we know that from what we've heard from elected officials, they know of the matter. We definitely hope we're going to get a conversation about it at least, and they're going to hopefully do something to sort of make some progress here. And kind of what you said about when the governor went into that store, another thing we haven't talked about is there's no gate. So like we have documented evidence of people underage going in and just
100%. I mean, and you don't have to show. Do you have to show an ID in Missouri when you go into a legal cannabis dispensary?
Yes. When you walk into a legal cannabis dispensary, your ID is recorded. It's a completely private system, but it essentially is for the state to track to make sure. So you have purchase limits, you have purchase allotments that you can make. It's essentially just a way to tap down on people like buying a lot and then taking it out of state and selling it. Like just it's intent to distribute. It's just like a way to tamp that down. I think it's a lot. Like it's a lot of cannabis you can buy. So it's not like it's overly restricted in any capacity, right?
Well, and everybody's just complying with the law as it was designed and voted on by the citizens, right? And so, how successful do you think you'll be? Like when I'm thinking about just as a political person, this seems like a no-brainer for a politician to pass an intoxicating hemp ban, like to make sure that it doesn't get into the hands of Missouri's children.
I think a big part of it is education. I think a big part, educating the public, educating the people in power who sort of understand like what is really happening under the hood here. And there's certain things that when you talk to them, they just get blown away. Like for instance,
sure,
found several stores that have products that have other states' marijuana symbols on them for their industries, like the warning signs, which basically means that a lot of these retailers, if I'm like naming names, they're saying they all do it, but if you can like go in their stores and see, they're basically transporting cannabis across state lines and then reselling it. So now we're talking about federal charges. So it's a very
that's pretty dicey, right? And so, okay, is it like the police that are supposed to get involved at this point, or the sheriffs, or is it local? Is it the Department of Cannabis Control at the state level? Like who's in charge of kind of like policing this side market?
I think that what you just said right there is the crux of the issue, is understanding what level of government, which organization, which groups are supposed to be in charge of closing these loopholes and actually regulating or making sure these products get taken out of the stores and that there's some level of enforcement. So enforcement is a huge component of it. We've talked to members of local police departments and they've been like, it's the Department of Cannabis Regulation's job to sort of top down handle this. And then you talk to them and they're like, well, it's not really up to the local enforcement agencies to sort of handle what's illegal and restricted. And I think there's just like, listen, it's a complicated problem. And I think what we really need is, the AG, the governor, the other people in the legislature to really sort of, hey, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and this is who handles enforcement. So a major component of what we really think needs to happen in this next legislative session is a clarification of who's handling enforcement. What does enforcement actually mean? And how do you sort of prevent this market from this unregulated market from continuously reemerging? So it's definitely something that requires a lot of stakeholders doing the work, But the thing is, in this constitutional amendment, we created a regulatory system to handle this. all the tools are there. It's just getting everybody on the same page. Everything is like, we've already built the systems. We've already built these processes. It's just, it's just a clarification of definition, I think. So,
and it's been implemented, and there's a lot of parts of it that are really working. It sounds to
they
me
work very well.
like
Yeah,
they're working for industry. They're
Mhm.
working, but then there's this one thing that's going on that kind of, it seeks to undermine the whole
Yeah.
system that you've built, right? So, because what is the incentive for anybody to enter in as a competitor in the legal cannabis market? Like, if there's no way to be
Why would we
profitable.
keep our cannabis licenses when we could just sell them and then just open up these unregulated stores and say we sell these other products? Like, what's the incentive to continue to incur these costs? Like, I don't want to be like a doomsdayer, but like at the current rate, I don't see how the regulated cannabis market could survive another 12 to 18 months with this unregulated industry. Really,
No kidding.
continuously.
So it's like really, it's just sort of at the beginning of your birth into the industry too. Like, you're kind of still like a little bit of a toddler, you're not maybe in the crib, but maybe you're like a little toddler, as far as the industry goes, kind of running around, bumping into walls. But, like you're still vulnerable is what I'm
Yeah, I
saying.
mean, we began raising capital for our operation like 7 years ago. And, it's very expensive to operate one of these legal businesses. So then to see somebody just like go on Alibaba or go on one of these other sites and just buy all these other products, and not have to really put any of the same type of work in to develop a local thriving industry and just sort of, you see what I'm saying? It's unfortunate because the Missouri industry has a lot of room to grow. It has a lot of room to keep improving. There's what I was saying before. There's all that additional flowering canopy, which can still be developed. But why would anybody put the money into that now if they don't think they're going to get a return? Which means you kind of have this thing where, like, as it becomes more expensive to operate the legal industry, but it becomes cheaper to operate the unregulated industry, it just the problem makes itself worse over time.
And then also you have the veterans not getting the money, the public defenders not getting the money, the schools not getting the money in the tax revenue, which is substantial. Like, that's, we're not at a place in any state in America where we can afford to say no to more tax revenues for things to take care of our kids. And then you've got this whole public health thing, and that, to me, it seems like the politicians should get that, like, immediately. Like, maybe they didn't take an economics class, but they definitely understand what it is to, have the kids being winding up in emergency rooms because they're, getting some hemp gummies at the gas station. And then, they wind up in the back of an ambulance.
Some of these products are genuinely dangerous. And that's not just like trying to scare people. Like, there's a new derivative. There's like a synthetic cannabinoid called HHC, and it is significantly more powerful than THC. And I don't know if you've consumed cannabis product.
Like, you mean the high that you would get from this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was actually
that's scary.
It was just banned in Ireland because there was increases in psychiatric cases across the country in some of these places where they sell this, and they were able to trace it back and be like, oh my God, this is, there's a trend here. The people who are consuming this it has mental and psychological effects. They're drugs. These are not the legal cannabis products. This isn't a pre-roll. This isn't a joy. This isn't an edible. These are synthetic derivatives that are meant to be as potent as possible to sort of get you addicted.
But also, like, they could be, how are they labeled? Okay, so the addiction part is definitely interesting too, because, like, the higher the intoxication, does that mean that the higher risk of getting addicted to something? Because,
well, I think what they do is, they interact with your cannabinoid system differently. They interact with your body in a different way. That's a little bit more unpredictable. And kind of what you said too was like, nobody really knows what's in them. Nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody really knows. There's been really no studies or data. They're just like, they're invented in a lab and they get thrown in a package, you know.
So in the legal cannabis that gets sold, um, if you buy something like a gummy, for example, does it say on the gummy this is like 5 milligrams or 10
It's
milligrams?
required to say that.
It's required to say how much it is.
Yes.
And then you know how much you're ingesting and you can kind of count on it.
This
Like
is,
if you
this is
don't want to go
Yeah.
crazy and you just want to have like a little tiny bit.
So this is the thing with that testing component and having to go through this testing and certification before it hits shelves. And that's knowing the full count of inputs, which is part of metric, and knowing exactly what's coming out and that's been tested. So some of the products that have been tested have been like significantly less than they're marketed as, and then others have been significantly more. So if you're, you know, if you think you're getting something, you're like, okay, this is what I think I should do here. And then you're taking that, but really what you're taking is 2 or 3 times more than you anticipated. But then it's just not a good experience for the consumer. And it can be dangerous, especially when those
Yeah.
are,
And kids, the kids, you know, the kids.
Yeah, there's been stories of like, you know, kids showing up to high school classes and just like not being able to talk. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are worse stories out there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a super interesting topic. It's different in every state what's going on, all the different patchwork of laws. You know, we've definitely done a lot of reporting about it. We've looked at Texas, but this is, you know, the first time that we saw Missouri kind of pop up on the radar because of the failure of some of the attempts to try to remedy this problem with the government. And you know, I mean, if I had to prognosticate a little bit, it seems like a powerful issue where I'll bet that if you were to educate more people about it and more legislators, that, you know, you're going to be able to find some remedies here. I'm gonna guess. And let me just ask you, if you didn't get the remedies that you wanted from the state in short order, is it possible that the citizens of Missouri could sort of band together and get a law passed like on their own to ban the intoxicating hemp products?
So to do that is very intensive. So the constitutional amendment, anything like that, it costs millions and millions of dollars. You have to get hundreds of thousands of signatures.
Oh yeah, we know all about that at Independent Voter. Now, you know, we know.
Oh yeah. So it is something that like we think that the community has a very valid role to play in pressuring, contacting local officials, writing, calling up, you know, reaching out to your local police department, let them know you care, contacting your councilman or woman, and just making it known that this is a problem and you actually care about it, and just get people to like helping educate the public on the differences and the threat. It's an uphill battle, you know, it's definitely an uphill battle, but we think that when you lay the cards out on the table and you show any reasonable legislator kind of what's going on here, it's pretty easy to see that this is a problem. And unfortunately, the longer it goes unresolved, the harder it's going to get to actually get straightened out. So
Right. So you got to like get that loophole closed. You got to bring all the products under the umbrella where they're legal, and you know and you know, when Missouri does that, it'll be the model for the rest of the country. I imagine that when you first passed the recreational framework, you know, you kind of thought you had done your job. Like you already went through the thing, but as everyone knows, politics, it's very messy. Implementation, very messy.
I definitely when like the state has actually taken action on these items, they've really done a good job at kind of what we said before about legalizing it and making it recreational. They took everything else that had been done nationwide and really made intelligent laws. And we think that they would do that again. And multiple states, 15, 16, 17, around the exact counts, but several other states have enacted these types of regulations and restrictions. So it's definitely not unheard of. We wouldn't be the first. The hemp industry is obviously still thriving. It's not like you can't have your cake and eat it too in this regard, I think. So I certainly think that 2026 will be a really big year, and we just start hoping for some sort of action so we can just, keep doing what we love. And
Yeah, and make sure you check back in with us over the next, couple of months, as the lawmakers are debating the new rules.
Sure.
One thing's super clear to me, that the consumers, they definitely deserve safety. They deserve transparency. The people who are operating these stores, these legal businesses, they deserve to have some fairness, right? The people who are doing things the right way shouldn't have to compete with a system that plays by no rules at all. This is how it really works. The Independent Voter Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Dave Craig, thanks for being with us. And keep in touch, okay? Keep following Independent Voter News. Keep following Independent Voter Podcast. It's wonderful to be with you all today. And thank you so much for listening.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.